Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I used to work the overnight shift at a small gas station just off a lonely stretch of highway. It wasn't a big chain, just one of those old, run-down places with flickering lights and a weird smell that never seemed to go away, like stale cigarettes mixed with engine oil. The kind of place where the coffee is burnt, the security cameras don't really work, and truckers stop in at 3 a.m. looking dead behind the eyes. I hated it, but I needed the money. It was always the same long, boring shifts, the occasional weirdo, and the steady hum of the refrigerators in the back. But one night, around 2 a.m., something happened that made me quit for good. A man walked in, tall, too tall, maybe 6 feet 5 inches, or even taller. He was wearing a faded hoodie and jeans, the kind of clothes that should have made him blend in, but something about him stood out. Maybe it was the way he moved, too smooth, too silent. Or maybe it was the thing that made my stomach twist the moment I saw him. He didn't blink, not once. He walked straight up to the counter, didn't grab a snack, didn't glance at the lottery tickets, didn't even fake interest in the cheap sunglasses rack like most people did when they weren't actually buying anything. Just stood there, staring at me. Now, I've dealt with plenty of weirdos in my time. Drunks, tweakers, even the occasional guy trying to rob the place with a butter knife. But this guy was different. I forced a nervous smile. "Can I help you?" He tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to figure something out about me. His neck made a slow, deliberate crack as he moved. Then, in a voice that was too calm, he asked, "What time do you get off?" A chill crawled up my spine. I wasn't wearing a name tag. The schedule wasn't posted anywhere visible, and there was no way he could know if I was working alone. I swallowed hard and tried to play it off. Shift changes at different times." "Why?" He smiled. Not the kind of polite smile you give a cashier when they hand you your change. It was too slow, too deliberate, like he was testing out how it felt on his face. "Just curious," he said. Then, just as silently as he came in, he turned around and walked out the door. I watched him through the glass, expecting him to leave, but he didn't. He stood by pump number 3, staring up at the sky. The gas station lights buzzed overhead, flickering like they always did. His hoodie was pulled tight over his head, but I could still see his jawline, the sharp angle of it. He didn't move, didn't pull out a phone, didn't light a cigarette. He just stood there, and that's when I saw it. His reflection in the glass wasn't moving. I felt my throat close up. I looked at him, then back at the reflection. He was standing outside, facing away from me, but in the glass, his reflection was staring right at me. My breath hitched. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. It didn't change. My hands felt clammy. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to do something, but I just stood there, frozen behind the counter. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking. I didn't even think about calling 911. I just needed to act like I wasn't alone. I pressed the screen and put the phone to my ear, pretending to talk. "Yeah, I'm at work," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, come by now." The moment I said that, the man twisted his head toward me. Not his body, just his head. His neck cracked again, slower this time, as he turned his face all the way toward the window. His smile got wider. Then his lips moved. He whispered something, but I couldn't hear it through the glass. And then he was gone, not walked away. Gone. 1 second, he was standing by the pumps. The next, nothing. I scanned the lot. The empty highway stretched into the darkness. No cars, no sound. Nowhere he could have gone that fast. I stood there, gripping the counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I don't remember much after that. I think I just sat there in shock, staring at the door, waiting for him to come back. He never did. I quit that job the next day. I didn't even pick up my last paycheck. And for a while, I tried to forget about it. Told myself I imagined it, that it was a trick of the lights, a tired mind playing games with me. But sometimes, late at night when I drive past that old gas station, I still see him, standing by the pumps, watching, and still not blinking. Story 2. I was on the way home from a late shift, just a typical night, nothing unusual. The clock had just hit 1 a.m., and the roads were nearly empty. The kind of empty that makes you feel like you're driving through a ghost town. The headlights from my car barely cut through the dark, and the only noise was the soft hum of the engine. I hadn't planned to stop, but my gas light flickered on. I groaned under my breath. The nearest station was a rundown place, barely open past midnight. The lights were dim, the parking lot empty except for 1 or 2 cars parked far off in the distance. I pulled in and turned off the engine, my fingers already reaching for my wallet, cursing the timing. As I walked up to the pump, I noticed her. She came out of the darkness, appearing as if she'd just materialized from thin air. Her clothes were ragged, her hair wild, and her eyes wide with panic. She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling like she'd run miles. "Please," she gasped. Her voice was shaky, barely a whisper, but desperate. "Can you help me?" I froze. There's something about being approached in the dead of night by a stranger that sends a jolt of fear through your body. The streetlight above flickered as I glanced at her, unsure whether to be kind or cautious. 100 thoughts raced through my mind. Is she in trouble? Is she safe? Should I help her? "What's wrong?" I asked, already regretting my decision to even speak. She pointed toward a beat-up car parked near the dumpster, its lights off. There's someone in my trunk." I stared at her, the words hanging in the cold air like smoke. At first, I thought she was delirious, maybe a prank, or she'd had too much to drink. But the way she trembled, her eyes wide and filled with real terror, made me pause. I turned and looked at the car. Sure enough, the trunk was slightly open, just a sliver, like it hadn't fully latched. My stomach knotted. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my distance, to not get involved. "Did you call the police?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She nodded, frantic. "They said they'd be here in 10 minutes. But what if he gets out before then? Please, please don't let him get out." Her words rattled me more than I cared to admit. Something about the way she said it wasn't just a man, it was him. Like the very mention of him could set off some terrible chain of events. My stomach flipped, but I forced myself to stay composed. "Are you sure? Are you sure you're okay?" I asked, my voice shaking. I should have walked away right there. I know that now, but I was too far gone. Just then, we both heard it. A soft thud from inside the trunk. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the wind, or maybe the car settling. But then, I heard it again. A deep, slow breath. A sound so unsettling, so deliberate. It was as if whoever, or whatever, was in that trunk was listening to us. My heart hammered in my chest. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial 911, the trunk burst open. A man crawled out. Not jumped. Crawled. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He didn't stumble or stagger. He crawled like a creature trying to escape. His movements were unnatural, jerky, like something out of a nightmare. And then he grinned. It was wide, sickening, the kind of smile that makes your blood run cold. His teeth gleamed in the dim light, too white, too sharp. There was something wrong about him, something hollow in his eyes. He looked at me like I was his prey, and the way he spoke, "She's lying," he rasped, his voice low and cracked. "This is my car." The woman started shaking her head furiously, her voice cracking with fear. "No, no, no." He got in when I wasn't looking. "Please, please, you have to believe me." I didn't wait another second. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the gas station store, the panic rising in my throat like a tidal wave. We ran, stumbling in the dark, the sound of his footsteps behind us. The store's glass doors clanged shut behind us, and I slammed the lock, my hands trembling. We both gasped for air, leaning against the glass, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. "There's a man, he's after her. Please, you have to send someone now." The police arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the still night air. But by the time they pulled up, the man was gone. His car was still there, parked near the dumpster, but he was nowhere to be found. The officers went through the car, checking the trunk, the interior, everything. But when they opened the trunk, I wasn't prepared for what they found. Duct tape, rope, a knife. The woman was right. It wasn't her car, and that man wasn't just some random guy. He had been waiting for her. She wasn't his first target, and she wouldn't be his last. He had plans for her, and for anyone else who came too close. The cops told me they'd investigate further, but honestly, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been lucky. That night, I might have just walked into something I wasn't supposed to see, something I wasn't supposed to survive. I left the station shortly after, the woman in tow, both of us in shock. She had no idea where the man had gone, no idea how he had gotten into the trunk or why he'd targeted her. She didn't know if he had anyone else working with him. But one thing I knew for sure, one thing that stuck with me long after that night, was the realization that he was still out there. And maybe he wasn't done. Story 3. It was well past midnight when my gas light flickered on. The kind of quiet, bone-chilling night where everything feels just a little too still, like the world's holding its breath. I had been driving for hours, coming back from a weekend trip, and my phone's battery was just about to give up on me too. A lone road stretched out ahead, the kind where the only light came from my headlights and the occasional reflective sign. I'd been on that road before, years ago, but tonight it felt different, darker. As I continued driving, the miles seemed to stretch out longer than they should have. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light in the distance. The lonely glow of a gas station sign, cracked and blinking like a warning. I didn't even have a choice. It was the only station around for miles. So I pulled off the road and coasted in. I had hoped for a quick stop, get the gas, and go. But when I pulled in, something felt off. There were no other cars, no other people, just the single, weathered gas pump under the flickering light, the kind that hadn't been replaced in ages. The station was one of those old, out-of-date places. Flaking paint, dusty windows, a door that barely stayed closed. The kind of place you might drive by without thinking twice. But tonight it seemed different. Empty. I glanced at the windows. There were no lights inside. No movement. The place felt abandoned, but the gas pump was still working. At least I thought it was. I parked and stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the gravel beneath me. The air had that sharp, cool bite to it, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache with every breath. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching, but the lot was still empty. I reached into my pocket for my card and slid it into the pump. The screen flickered, then settled on 0.00 gallons. The numbers glowing in that eerie, lifeless way. I thought nothing of it at first, just assumed it was an old pump. Maybe the system was down. I fiddled with it, pulled the card out, and tried again, but nothing happened. The screen remained stuck on 0. That's when I heard it, a crackling noise. Faint at first, like the sound of a voice coming from somewhere far away. It grew louder, clearer. Don't turn around. I froze. The voice wasn't loud. No, it was almost a whisper, but one that seemed to wrap around me like a cold hand. I didn't know what to do. Don't turn around. My heart started pounding in my chest. A sudden cold swept over me, seeping through my jacket, and my breath caught in my throat. I could feel something behind me, but I didn't dare look. I just stood there, my hands frozen on the gas pump handle, my feet glued to the ground. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Was this a prank? A bad joke? I forced myself to take a slow, deep breath, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. But then the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My whole body was on high alert, like I was being watched, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was just behind me, waiting for me to look. My fingers fumbled for my phone, shaking as I unlocked it. I opened the security app, hoping the station had cameras, praying for something to confirm I wasn't going crazy. The screen loaded slowly, the spinning circle mocking me with every passing second. Finally, the feed appeared. The view of the parking lot was clear. Just me, or so I thought. Then the screen glitched, just a brief flicker of static like someone had tampered with it. And then I saw it, a tall, shadowy figure standing just behind me, inches away. I nearly dropped the phone. The figure was black against the dim light, too tall to be anyone I knew, and its edges blurred like smoke, like it didn't belong. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its presence, thick and suffocating, pressing against me like it wanted to crush me into the earth. My heart slammed in my chest. I whipped around instinctively, but there was nothing, just the empty gas station, the empty lot, the faint hum of the pump. My car parked just a few feet away. Everything looked just as it had before, except for one thing. My car door was wide open. I didn't think. I didn't stop to question anything. I dropped the phone, lunged for the door, and slammed it shut behind me, locking it instantly. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. I didn't care about the gas. I didn't care about anything but getting out of there. I hit the gas pedal and tore out of the lot, my tires screeching as I sped back onto the road. My eyes were locked on the rearview mirror. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop looking. And that's when I saw it. Under the gas station lights in the distance, I saw it again. The shadowy figure, standing exactly where I had been, waiting. I didn't slow down. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back again until I was miles away. The station nothing but a dim light in my rearview mirror. But even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see it. The shadow, the feeling of it watching me, waiting, and no matter how fast I drive, how far I go, it's like it's always behind me, just out of reach, waiting,